sitting in your gaming chair, eating popcorn all day.
You
Oh,
stupid,
so
dumb
disappointed. He's like,
alcoholic.
"What?"
My man, you
Oh.
look like the toy repairer from Toy Story 2 or something.
Yeah, he was a cool guy.
Bro, that scene where he actually repairs Woody is still pretty elite, but
I love that scene.
he's still an
It's
absolute...
amazing. He's just like new.
what a weird twist of Toy Story 2 / Warhammer crossover.
Can't wait for Buzz Lightyear to get his own Space Marine chapter. It'll be so good.
I've seen people paint him in that style.
Yeah, I've seen that.
It actually looked really good.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the next episode of the Beginner to Expert podcast. We are continuing our journey with the Great Crusade / following the glorious legions of the Emperor. Andy's a big fan of Imperial stuff, so this is his bread and butter.
I like them. They're good.
Colin, not so much. He's an Eldar fan, but he's willing to represent some Imperial Fists, I think, at some point.
Indeed. Right? I like the fists. Fists are cool. I like the fists.
He likes the fists. Quote. Everyone has to remember he said that.
Feel free. I've said far worse.
True. But before we get into the episode, we will start with our question of the week. And that was on our previous episode on Nagash. And this was with the hashtag, such is the power of. And we'll be honest, these answers were good. We appreciate all of them, very much so. Quite a big representation of Warhammer Fantasy in this one particularly, but we'll get straight on into it because I know Colin's itching to hear some of these answers, particularly the fantasy ones. The first one was the first one's from Rarest Pepe 38115. Good name.
Nice.
Such is the power of. I would resurrect Felix, and I would do so by telling Gotrek that Nagash has his soul, and then just sit back and wait. It's a
Good answer.
It's a pretty strong answer, to be honest, though.
He did Felix dirty.
Bro, Felix got done so dirty.
Do you think Felix should be brought back, Colin, or do you think you don't want him to ruin him anymore?
I
Can
want
he be like a
Felix.
Sigmar guy?
If he was a Stormcast, Gotrek realizes he would have no memory of himself and would functionally not be Felix.
Rip.
Although Gotrek can heal memories just by being around people because he's so tough he beats the amnesia out of them or something. I don't
That
remember.
could be a good story though. Like, oh, he comes back as a Stormcast, and there's like some tension because it's like, you do know me, but you don't know that. But
Yeah, because
come join me on some adventures. And
Felix
remember when I
is
killed that big thing? And he's like, no.
Felix is asking who this random dwarf is, and Gotrek is holding back tears.
Oh,
Sheesh.
you don't have to make it that emotional, Christ.
It would be. I would feel that emotional.
Moving on, because pain. Such is the power of Skarsnik, that he was actually forgotten by the End Times writers, but he
man.
snuck past them. In lore, bring him back to AOS as a guerrilla warfare expert who snuck through the Skaven dimensional tunnel things and found his way back to his green-skinned buddies. Make him so sneaky that he snuck past the end of the world. I mean, that's a big call out
I
there.
know, that'd be pretty cool.
Who is
He's
that?
not wrong. The writers admitted they just forgot about him. It was like, oops.
Jeez.
Do you not know who? Someone explained to Andy who Skarsnik is. I don't know. Jan, do you know who Skarsnik
Oh
is?
no, I
Andy?
just meant who the commenter was.
Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot their name. That was read by @lunchmeat. Okay, good name. Thank you, @lunchmeat. Okay.
Skarsnik is Goblin Sun Tzu because the goblins are allowed to be infinitely more important in fantasy than the gods.
Oh, I misheard that. I thought you meant he was Goblin Sun Tzu.
Ah,
What? And I was like, oh, as in a goblin. Oh.
he did not eat
Two
Sun
very
Tzu.
different meanings for a moment there.
At least I don't think he ate Sun Tzu. Maybe
Wow.
it's a white dwarf I forgot to read.
Got the wrong edition of Art of War. Christ, the ending's a bit. The ending doesn't seem to match the rest of the book. The next one, which is by Marco Podolor. Sorry, bro, if I messed that up. Hashtag such is the power of I would resurrect Ferrus Manus. After all the dramatic returns of 40k characters, it will be nice for absolutely nothing of relevance to happen.
Oh man,
Oh, poor
Wait,
Gorgon, man.
bro, come on. We were
Oh,
just talking
man.
about the Iron Hands and how like them. I was being
Man.
trolled.
The guy literally said Ferrus Manus would come back and then no one would care. That's so mean.
Oh my
He's not
gosh,
wrong.
man. Bro,
It does remind me though of like that comment of what was it? Corvus Corax are so good at being invisible, people don't even remember him in the setting. Like, oh, him and Ferris, they're like the two where you're like, oh yeah, like they're somewhere.
At least
In
Ferris,
something.
or not Corvus,
Yeah, at
can
least
make
he has the
funny
excuse of
invisible
being
joke.
dead.
No, I was at least Corvus. You can make the funny invisible joke. What joke can you make for
Oh.
Ferris?
It's not getting ahead of us. Head jokes, basically.
Ah, there we go.
Did someone not I swear, did someone send a picture like they had the new Ferrus Manus art?
Oh,
but they just
yeah,
had
the
his
new
head?
Horus Heresy art. I'll put it in, and it's like, yeah.
memes.
Like they're
One of
missing
my
his
guys
head.
on Discord cut the head off and like filled it in. I'm like, very clever guys, very well done, but I can't approve of this.
God, it literally comes back as a headless chicken, essentially. Oh,
well,
so
I
mean.
actually like Ferris, and I think he's cool.
Shut up, nerd.
Although, what was it? I love with the actual uncut head off artwork. The comment I saw was something along the lines of like, he looks like a rugby player called Shane. Like, oh,
It makes it sound douchey. Like you're just not.
yeah, but
Yeah.
the way his expression is, it looks like that.
Shout out to all of my Shanes.
Shout out to Shane listening to this with his family, and he's like not
Hashtag
expecting
Shane
a call
Manus.
out. Hashtag Shane. Thank you watching, Shane. And the last one was by Dominic Jackman 2529. Hashtag such is the power of I would resurrect Karl Franz, but instead of making him into a Stormcast, I would have Nagash keep him as a Thrall champion because he just ruins everything he touches. Bit on and off that one, I'm not gonna lie.
No, I don't know about that one. Nah,
It was very
Carl
much. You
Franz
had
would
me in the
break free.
first half.
Yeah, had me in the first half, but
Carl Franz would break free. He's too good for Nagash.
it's definitely an opinion though. It's controversial, especially as Karl Franz does not deserve to be kept by Nagash by any means. That would be, I think people would actually riot if that even happened.
He's the Celestian Prime, though, bro. I'm not coping.
I feel like Nagash would get pissed off with his perfect jawline as well and be like, I'm not having that around me. People are going to go, oh, he's got a better jawline than you, Nagash. He's like, yeah.
And you're just a skeleton. You're all jawline.
Exactly.
Can you imagine in the middle of the battle, he just like Nagash's hordes are just throwing themselves at the Stormcast, and he just randomly hears "Summon the Elector Count." It's just like,
This
I've
isn't
heard
the
that
right
before.
setting anymore.
I know. It's like, wait, I swear I've heard that before, and it's just like, did you like the guy next? Like, did you say that? Like, what?
Gets his head cut off.
I mean, it doesn't need exactly the Ferris treatment, does he?
The Reichland Rune Fang.
But having said that, though, thank you so much for your answers. We really appreciate them. A lot of them are particularly on point, particularly the fancy ones. We do wish, maybe when we're all grandparents or, granddad age or whatever, we'll hopefully have one of fantasy back.
Hell, I think you're forgetting to shout out a very special answer someone gave.
Oh, is it because the one that I wrote an answer, which I said I would like Carl
I thought-
Franz. Oh, no, is there one? Go ahead.
I thought you meant, wasn't there one who just listed off all of
Oh,
such-
yes, before we forget, unfortunately, we couldn't include it in this one because it would take too long to read, but someone did mention that we wanted to bring back Cetra, and they listed every single one of his titles. I'm not joking, check the comments on the Nagash video. We shout to you, brother.
Yeah.
We deeply appreciate that one. But
When you hit show more and then it's a 3-page essay, you found the right comment.
that's
The thing was,
a lot of
there
commitment.
was another comment that was something along the lines of like, oh, for 10k subs, you should have Colin read out the entirety of all of Cetra's names in an ASMR voice.
I'll do that
like
next
market.
stream.
I think
Nice.
people would enjoy that for a total of 3 seconds and then immediately shut off.
Too bad, I'd keep going.
I don't know. Colin's got that video on his channel that just summon the Elector counts for what, like 10 hours or whatever it is?
I also have a video where I just read off all of his titles.
I remember the day when Horace shat himself as well.
Favorite comment I've got in any video.
Well, with that being said, though, we do have another question for this week, which is a little bit more Primarch focused. This is hashtag Lost Primarch, and we're looking for some funny answers on this one. What is the name of the Lost Primarch, and why was he censured from Imperial records? Hashtag Lost Primarch. Example could be he was, Steve Buscemi, and he was censured for Imperial records, as we said earlier, for being a Reddit user. That's not. No one steal that answer. That's mine. But that's just a small example. And with that being said, though, today we'll be continuing with our episode on the Great Crusade. I think this is part 3, and we're following the next few legions. We'll be doing White Scars, Space Wolves, and Imperial Fists, and I'll hand it over to Andy to take it away.
I was doing the recap.
Oh, no, sorry, Colin's doing a recap. My bad. Sorry. Colin will do a small recap of what we have previously covered. Colin, take it away.
Of course, thank you. Just a quick little recap from last episode. The Great Crusade, for those who are not too familiar, was the Emperor setting out with his many legions of Astartes and normal humans to conquer the galaxy in the name of humanity, to reunite all the lost human worlds and expand even further if they have the time for it. It also, of course, had the secondary objective of finding his sons that were lost into the warp, which, given that they were supposed to be the generals of his armies, he kind of really needed them. So he set out across the galaxy with A, conquer it, B, find my damn kids. And for the legions we covered last time, the Dark Angels, what they were up to in the Great Crusade, they were the Emperor's first and arguably greatest, definitely most trusted legion, given access to equipment from the Dark Age that not any of the other legions had. They had Men of Iron, which the fact they had them even in a reduced capacity was insane because Imperium does not like AI, but the Dark Angels just got to keep a couple of them as pets. They suffered pretty heavy losses against the Rangden in the one of the wars against them. So for that, and Lionel Johnson not being the most sociable of gentlemen, shall we say, he was passed over for the role of War Master. But nevertheless, they served with great distinction, and they were easily one of the most respected of the legions at the time. The next one, the Emperor's Children. For their stellar service, they were granted the honor of bearing the Emperor's own name. Because despite a gene seed crisis where it was called the Blight, it was more like, feel free to correct me on this, basically super cancer, has always been my understanding of the Blight.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. They were nonetheless serving very well, and when they found their Primarch, the issue wasn't fixed, but they had new gene seed, so it was kind of put off. And once, aside from that, because of this, when they found Fulgrim, reunited with him, and got new gene seed, they were given a new lease on life. They became one of the more morally upstanding legions, funnily enough, for what's coming later on the line, with a bit of a bent towards perfectionism, which surely is not a sign of things to come for the Emperor's Children. And the last legion we covered, the Night Lords. Unlike the other two, they
Iron Warriors,
were pretty much...
Sorry, Iron Warriors.
Oh God.
We haven't done Night Lords yet.
I don't know why I wrote down Night Lords. That's what. Pardon me. Iron Warriors. They were unlike the other two. When they found their Primarch, they got infinitely worse because Perturabo showed up, looked at their performance, and said, "This isn't good enough." So he killed 1 in 10 of their. Had the rest of his legion kill 1 in 10 of them. And from that moment on, the Iron Warriors became experts at siege warfare and were generally deployed to the worst of the worst war zones where they were just ground down into dirt because Perturabo did not feel like ever once saying, "Could I do something different?" And they became a very resentful, bitter legion over their Primarch, the circumstances they were in, just reality in general. But fair's fair, they were very good at sieges. If you wanted a fortress cracked, you went to the Iron Warriors, who would usually take horrendous losses in both Astartes and normal people, but they would get it done. And that was a little recap of last time. Make sure to go watch it if you haven't. And without further ado, I will pass it on over to Andy. I don't know why I said Night Lords. I still don't know where that came from.
I mean, they both didn't get better with their Primarchs. They both had a crap.
I think maybe that's what it was. Like I was just thinking, yeah, they both got worse, and maybe that just filtered into my head.
Nightmare
And
Dad
4
syndrome.
times 2 is 8, so it's divisible. So yeah, who knows? But we'll be tackling them in the next episode, I suppose. But today, I'm actually front loading a lot of this episode. Today, I'm going to be discussing the White Scars and the Space Wolves, and then Colin's going to bring it home with a good fist in at the end with the Imperial Fists.
Which is specified that is an actual legion. We're not doing something on camera for the audio listeners.
Okay, all right.
It's going a bit too far.
Just playing it
already,
safe.
my bad.
Just playing it safe.
But yeah, and also I love, like, the White Scars is my favorite legion, so I couldn't not talk about them. So without further ado, let's talk about the 5th Legion. Back during the unification of Terra, the 5th Legion used to be known as the Star Hunters, and they were drawn from the Fulian Basin. Now, at first, there were actually only 100 or so warriors, a couple of hundred maybe. So in a similar way to the 3rd Legion, they were quite small numbers, but not because of, space cancer. It was more of, they were a bit more niche. And they would endure the harshest of all of Terra's environments and would earn a reputation as being like the scouts and the pathfinders of the Emperor's armies. And this extended when they actually joined the Great Crusade, where even though they were few in numbers and they wouldn't really earn much glory because, there's not really much you can say about, I found this fortification. It's like, oh, cool, you're not getting a medal for that. Whereas the Dark Angels come in and just smash it to pieces and they get laurels of victory. But because of their speciality, they would be set far and wide across the galaxy. In nature, they were very distant and solitary to their peers. They were reclusive in nature and had an independence to them. So it's not that they didn't necessarily get along with other legions, it's just they didn't really need to be around them that often. Why would they be around the big armies when they were at the forefront, picking targets, weakening enemy fortifications for them to come in later on to kick down the last remnants of resistance? But they didn't call for help very often, but they weren't vainglorious. This wasn't them being egotistical and saying, we can do anything ourselves. It was more of a case of they didn't want to imperil other legions by not getting it done themselves. And so they became very good at being self-reliant, figuring out tactics which wouldn't cost them too many casualties, and trying to be a bit clever about using hit-and-run tactics. They even had a motto saying something along the lines of, each day is a victory in itself. And this really exemplifies how good they were at championing survivability against impossible odds.
And for what it's worth,
were you going to say something, Colin?
Say they just didn't need the help a lot of the time.
Yeah, which is fair enough. I mean, again, you mentioned briefly with the recap, like the Iron Warriors, they were like, there's one way of war, you do that till you win. White Scars were like, nah, we're gonna use our brains a bit, we're gonna try and figure out, okay, we're not gonna have a huge army at our back, but can we attack this weak point? Does that work? No? Okay, we could fall back, we could try again, do a different composition of units, different weapons, that kind of stuff. But inevitably, with time, the 5th Legion would be eroded, their numbers would drop, until the discovery of everyone's favourite Primarch, Jagatai Khan, the Warhawk himself. Now, Jagatai was found on the world of Chogoris, which by the Imperial records would be Mundus Planus or Planus. Big verdant open lands, lots of big grassy fields. The ruling tyrants known as the Palatine, I believe it was, were basically oppressing the tribes of the various peoples of Chogoris, and On Khan, which would be Jagatai's adoptive father, found Jagatai in the plains and went near the Kumkata Mountains and went, oh look, it's a child, he'll be a great warrior. And long story short, we did a video on the White Scars previously, and I've talked about it a bit more there, but long story short, Jagatai would have ambitions beyond just warfare. He wanted to unite his people, and with a few years of work and a bit of elbow grease, he managed to do it. He conquered the Palatine, he united all the tribes of Chogoris, and with the arrival of the Emperor, he was very swiftly be inducted into the ranks of the Imperium, much to the dismay of Rabute, Gilliman, and Dawn, because they didn't like how he did things. They were like, this guy is just some, this horse riding crazy guy with a cool top knot. He's instantly given command of his legion, and we don't like his shamanistic people's beliefs and his rejection of some of the ideals of the Imperial Creed. That's a bit cringe. And it's like, no, Gilliman, Dawn, you're cringe. And then Chagoris is united. Jagatai's got a legion. After a few campaigns across the stars of the Great Crusade, Jagatai was starting to get a sense of what these new ceramite-clad Astartes warriors were like, and he's now at this point transformed his own men who have stood beside him into Astartes, including chads such as Chinsha and Targutai Yasugai. They're awesome characters. But after a while, he went, okay, we need to bring the Legion back to full strength. And bear in mind, for a few years now, quite a few years, I'm not exactly sure when Jagatai was found, but I think it's like the front half of all the Primarchs.
I thought he was found.
I don't know if
it's like relatively in the middle slash.
Yeah,
late
it's like
middle.
Not early, not late. It's kind of in that we've got some Primarchs already. We've got Primarchs at home. We've got more to find.
We've got Primarchs at home. We don't need to buy Primarchs.
Yeah, exactly. So the Imperium's already kind of doing all right as it is, but
I think they mention in Jagatai's book that when he arrives, because he goes back to Terra, doesn't he?
Yeah,
and then they
does
said
some learning.
Well, he said like when they arrived, so many Primarchs had already returned to the Imperium that basically every time, like when Horus arrived, there was a massive celebration. And then by the time Jagatai had arrived, it was like, oh yeah, like a small ceremony. Again,
party poppers, and that's
yeah.
it.
And by
you get a
end,
welcome card signed by Rogel like, "Hi, brother, nice to meet you." Signed, Dawn.
Yeah, so relatively like late-ish, but not the very tail end of. I think they're all quite found close together towards the end as well, but it was sort of middle late.
And when you consider like Dawn and Gilliman have already brought their own empires into the fold, and you've got people like Ferrus Manus and Lehman Russ and Horus who've been there. They're the first three who've been there every step of the way, mentoring their brothers. And all of a sudden, this guy Jagatai turns up out of nowhere, and it's like, oh, and he's going to take care of his scattered legion. Oh, fair enough. Not much fanfare, but as Jagatai got the hang of space warfare and the objectives of the Great Crusade, he went, okay, we need to reunite the Legion because everyone's spread out. Everyone's got a different, this company doesn't know this company. They're all a bunch of strangers. They're all getting their own cultural trappings and making their own customs as they're across many different parts of the galaxy. All right, I'm going to call them all back to Chagoris, and we're going to do something to bring us some meaning. And so it took about, I believe, 20 years.
It's
but eventually,
a while, yeah.
Definitely over a decade. So maybe not 20, but definitely over 10 years for all of the expeditionary fleets of the White Scars to convene at Chagoris. And upon Chagoris, they would conduct what is known as the blooding by scarring their faces with like ritual knives, abandoning their old names and adopting new names as they became, as a legion, the White Scars. And through this signifier of relinquishing the old, adopting the new, and uniting under one banner of the trappings and culture of the Warhawk of Chagoris, each Astartes would be unified in purpose and transform from strangers from across the stars into a united brotherhood. And I've actually got a quote. I was wondering if either Eli or Hal would like to read it. I put it in the side chat.
Oh wow, that's beefy, that one.
It's both her fair. This was beefier, but it's two characters as well.
I don't mind. If I want to. If I go early?
Yeah, you can. That is a long one. Holy moly.
Yeah. Excuse me. Apologies already for the pronunciation on some of the names, but I'll go for it. You are now of the Ordo of Jagatai, and your old life is no more. What name do you take to mark your ascension? Tamu had spoken it out loud many times in the days prior to the ceremony, getting used to the feel of it on his lips, trying to ease the strangeness of the transition. When he replied, it still felt jarring. Shiban, he said. Hasek handed him the glaive. You are one with the Ordu, Shiban. You are of the Brotherhood. You will not leave it except in death. May it be long in coming, and may glory accompany your deeds until that day. Shiban took the glaive in both hands. The weapon felt pleasantly heavily. God damn, I can't get that one out.
Pleasingly heavy.
Pleasingly, I got. The weapon felt pleasingly heavy in his gauntlets. He ran his eyes up and down the blade, noting the glyphs on the metal, the gliding on the gilding on the disruptor casing. It was perfect. For the great Khan, he said, bowing respectfully, his heart full to bursting. Wow, that's actually
Hey.
Best Legion for real.
my favorite actually part about the White Scars is that they don't call themselves White Scars. Isn't that they get that name from the other legions who they just see the scar and then they wear white armor.
They see these pale scratches on their face and they're like, "Oh, the scars, yeah." But they more or less refer to each other as the Ordu Jagatai.
Yeah.
They obviously have their own brotherhoods. Like there's the Brotherhood of the Moon, Brotherhood of the Sun, Brotherhood of the Golden Star, which are like their battle companies. But yeah, I like that quote in that it kind of shows you like one of the Astartes. I think is Shiban Terran. I think
Shiban is I don't think Shiban is Shiban's from the same clan I think as Jagatai. I think you're thinking of
Organ.
He's the White Scar who fights Abaddon in the Siege of Terror. I think you're thinking.
Jubal, yeah.
Jubal's Terran, but I had a weird thing I just noticed. It's kind of like, has anyone here played Fallout New Vegas?
Yeah.
I need to.
This is it reminds me of how Caesar in that game where he asked like, why do you well, you can ask him why is everyone like dressed up like the old Roman Empire of like old. And he said he needed like a culture to essentially bind all the groups together. And it's I found like a weird link between this and Jagatai, where he sort of bound the many different Star Phantoms into the White Scars.
But again, it's like it worked a charm because it makes sense of like you've literally had these companies roaming the stars for maybe as much as 50 to like 50 plus years. They haven't met their other companies. They have no bonds of friendship or loyalty. They're just like, oh, you're some other company that I don't know. So this was just a way of them to go, right, we're starting fresh, and we're going to do it in the good old Chigoran way, and we're going to get space bikes, and it'll be really cool.
Some of them fit in quite well, don't they? Like Jubal fits in, like some of the Terrans fit in almost like they were born of Chigoris, and some of them quite don't.
There's even a bit I remember of like they have like the fermented milk and some of them are drinking it and they're not quite used to like this weird like concoction that this Chigorans drink.
The fear.
This is weird.
Oh well. Life.
Yeah. But it's interesting again, like seeing the and even in the Horus Heresy there are characters who aren't from Chigoris or Terra who are put into the Legion and seeing their transition of like, oh, I am now a White Scar. And this is what it means to be one of the Fifth Legion, and we're bound by these traditions. And I think that's pretty cool. And like that quote does a good job of like a character getting used to, oh, this isn't my name anymore. Now I'm this person. It feels weird to say it, and I've been rehearsing, this being my name from now on. But I think that's pretty cool. Now it's worth saying that during the Great Crusade, White Scars were by no means one of the biggest legions. They had about 80,000 Astartes during the what was known as the Colin Circle of Planets compliance, and Jagatai then, following the blooding, went, all right, now we're united and we're a legion like my brothers have. We've got to do a trial by fire. So he used the Colin Circle as like an initiation. So he set all of his companies in the campaign. He divided them up and he said, okay, you're doing this, you're doing this, you're doing this, and he basically made it so that they would be, every single company would be overwhelmed with opposition. So none of them had an easy time of it. And about 1 in 10 of each of the companies would die during the 5-year war, which isn't the same as obviously like the decimation that Perturabo did, where he said, oh, you're weak, so kill the weakest person. It was like, no, I'm going to give you a chance to prove yourself in battle. And it wasn't like he was waiting for 1 in 10 to die. It was more of a case of, we've got to like make sure we're all up to standard. We're going to do this really grueling campaign, but I'm going to make it so that I test you to the best of your ability. And each company wouldn't be supported for a minimum of 3 years of fighting, so they fought alone as a band of warriors until they were deemed worthy of their namesake of the White Scars. And this did really well. Again, it weeded out some of the people in the Legion who wouldn't survive otherwise. They never lost momentum nor retreated from their foes. And at the forefront of each of the main battles of this campaign, Jagatai was at the spear tip, and the Legion would always compete to be at his side when he was fighting to prove themselves worthy of fighting with their Primarch. And it was like an element of, oh, I want Senpai to notice me. It's like, I want him to know that I'm a true member of the 5th Legion. I'm going to fight alongside him. Yeah, I'm cool. And yeah, over time, they would bring many worlds into compliance, fighting shoulder to shoulder with other cousin legions, until the pivotal campaign of the Ulanor Crusade. During the Ulanor Crusade, obviously the biggest orc greenskin empire that had ever been seen had amassed, and the Imperium had to bring every resource to bear to try and crush them. So the White Scars did their bit, and at the final Battle of Ulanor Prime, the White Scars stood alongside the Ultramarines, the Lunar Wolves, and the Emperor's own retinue to destroy Erlak Erg, who was the Orc war boss in charge of the Great Greenskin Tide. And then they won the battle, and the Ulanor Triumph happened, and at that point there was no doubt that the White Scars belonged among the rest of the legions as a proper legion that had proven themselves worthy. They also, even though they were proven in the eyes of the other legions, people still mistrusted their storm seers and their traditions. During the Council of Nicaea, which was the censure of the use of psychers within the Imperium, the White Scars Primarch would actually help draft the Librarius alongside Magnus the Red and Sanguinius to try and regulate psychers within the legions. But the White Scars particularly were conservative in the way they used the warp, and so during the Council of Nicaea they would be present to espouse the value of using psychers, but they also emphasized using restraint. But with all this said, they also followed, for example, the test of heaven with the way they utilized the warp with their storm seers, and despite their best efforts, they were seen as barbaric and unseemly by other parts of the wider Imperium, and no one really understood the White Scars. No matter how many, campaigns they won, compliances they brought, everyone was a bit unnerved by them just because they didn't understand them. Not in the same way of when you think of the Space Wars going, oh, they're just some barbarians from an ice world. The White Scars, they were like, there's something there, but I can't quite understand it. And, and the White Scars never made any efforts to try and show their hand, because they wanted people to underestimate them so that they could take full advantage if they needed to win battles or to gain the upper hand. But with the Council of Nicaea concluded, the White Scars would be banned from using any psychers, and they would continue. They were the Legion tasked with mopping up the last remnants of the Ulanor Orc War that was pretty much broken but now dispersing across the stars. And prior to the Horus Heresy, this would be the last thing they did until, obviously, the burning of Prospero, the Horus Heresy, and everything else. And that's basically a rundown of the White Scars and what they were up to. Do we have any questions?
I was going to say like a last statement, which particularly if you're new to Warhammer, you're kind of thinking, oh, the White Scar, like what makes them unique? Oh, the first thing we should probably mention is like speed, boy, baby. They are speedy boys. They are the fastest legion by far. They love their jet bikes, don't they, Andy? They love their jet bikes.
And they like to go fast.
Literally, that's their whole point, is they would shock and destroy. But also, they're kind of cool because they're similar to like when we tackle the Space Wolves later. The White Scars, from the culture that they birthed upon Chogoris, is very present within, like, some of the legions could be quite not, I wouldn't say generic, but you know what I mean, they're quite imperial, whereas the White Scars are very much a Chogorian legion, even throughout the Great Crusade, obviously when they were joined by Jagatai, and they're very, even in their early Great Crusade armor, they have all their cool stuff. That's my like kind of Final thought. Also, I'm not sure Jagatai is quite Caesar from New Vegas, but there's some similarities if you have played that game. It's a good game. That's pretty much it.
Down with the Legion.
Down the Legion.
Right, I guess if there's no more questions, should we move on to said Space Wolfy Boys, the other, quote, barbaric legion that no one understands or understood or wanted to?
Quite fitting that they're the two barbarian legions, quote unquote, are together.
Yeah, and there's some interesting parallels, but I should say before I start with the Space Wolves, the two legions don't get on. Even in the 41st millennium, there's a bit of animosity between the two because of the different ways they shall we say, conceal some of their more nobler characteristics and how they portray themselves to the wider Imperium. But let's start off by talking about the history of the Sixth Legion. So during the formation of the legions, every legion would be made with a specific purpose in mind. But the weird thing about the Space Wolves is they are the first of the, quote, trefoil legions. And each of these trefoil legions were made for a specific purpose. So the three are, you've got the 6th Legion, which is the Space Wolves, you've got the 18th Legion, which is the Salamanders, and the 20th Legion, which is the Alpha Legion. And the Emperor specifically kind of held back these legions to do a specific purpose the other legions couldn't do. Because although all the legions have a speciality in warfare, these legions had a particular purpose outside of warfare. Now, to talk about how they were drafted, the Space Wolves were not a legion drawn from a specific place. They were taken from all across Terra, but the unifying factor was they would draw from the most hyper-violent and savage of all the places on Terra. So if you're frothing at the mouth, you're probably going to get drafted into the 6th Legion, because for what they were destined to do, the Imperium was like, we need this like nasty person who will like bite your ear off. That's the kind of guy we want in this legion, which is weird considering the World Eaters exist. But anyway, during the conquest of unification of Terra, the 6th Legion, although it was built up to strength, was deliberately held back from being deployed. This is possibly due to the fact that they had a really high mortality rate when transplanted with the 6th Legion gene seed. It could also be for the fact that the Emperor was specifically holding them back for this purpose he had in mind. But either way, they were isolated from their peers, and they would be spared some of the crises, such as the gene seed crisis, which happened to the 3rd Legion. They'd be spared from being split up like the 5th Legion. They'd be spared from being completely decimated by endless meat grinder kind of warfare like the 4th Legion, or gene flaws like the 9th Legion. They actually did quite well during unification because they were never really seen. But once the unification wars were over, and the Great Crusade was put into its first really difficult steps to expand into the stars, then the 6th Legion were unleashed. About 3,500 Astartes strong, they would be led personally by the Emperor during the compliance of the world known as Delsvarn. And the Delsvarn civilization was particularly technologically advanced. They had inherited equipment from the Age of Strife and the Dark Age of Technology, and only a really overwhelming force would be capable of killing these opponents. So the, quote, rout of Terra, which are basically, they were known as the jackals or carrion feeders of Terra, were unleashed in their entirety to destroy the opposition of Delsvarn, and they completely destroyed them, and there's not really any records of anything they did other than the fact that they didn't let anyone live, and there's no Delsvarnian survivors left because the rout had their feed of the carrion of battle, and you don't need to know more than the fact that they were completely merciless and savage, and they got the job done more than any other legion was expected to do. Now, over time, the rout would grow in number, but they would still they wouldn't get to the same size as, say, the Lunar Wolves or the Ultramarines. Like, they were about the third of the size of the Dark Angels or Lunar Wolves during the Great Crusade. But despite the fact that they weren't a big legion, they nonetheless got many glories, many plaudits. They were extremely effective, but they had a huge civilian casualty rate and collateral damage. So you only really wanted to unleash the rout onto an enemy if you didn't want anything left standing, because they don't care if you're using human shields, they don't care if you're using, quote, Geneva Conventions. They're just going to butcher everyone in their path until the job's done.
The Geneva Suggestions is what they refer to them as.
That is brilliant.
And in a way, because of the fact that they were so undisciplined in that regard, they were actually a very fractious internally legion. Like, there were lots of conflicts within their own organization, to the point where officers were appointed by pure martial prowess and strength. So the strongest would become officers, and if you weren't strong, it doesn't matter what you say. But they also had this curse in their gene seed known as the Canis Helix, which would slowly begin to set in without the genetic materials of their Primarch to resolve some of the flaws in its design. So at this point, the route is not in a great place. They don't have a Primarch, and there's only one Primarch in the Imperium at this point, and that's Horus Lupercal. They're internally fractious, they've got a bad reputation, and there's flaws setting in from their gene seed, and without their Primarch, it's going to go really terribly. Luckily for them, the second Primarch to ever be found, Leman Russ, would be discovered on the world of Fenris, a barren ice world full of terrible monsters and a Viking culture, feudal society. And again, long story short about his own story, we did videos on the Primarchs, etc. He would come to rule Fenris as a barbarian king of the ice tribes. He would unite the entire planet, and with his introduction to the Sixth Legion, the Sixth Legion would adopt the cultural trappings of Fenris. They would live in the image and shadow of their Primarch, and they would now regard themselves as the Vilka Fenrica, and fervently follow in the Wolf King's footsteps with whatever he did. And it was actually a very good time for them, because then they got to stabilize their gene seed. A lot of Leman Russ's men who had fought with him on Fenris were quite old, so there was a lot of casualties when they tried to make them into Astartes. But the Astartes who survived the procedure were extremely gruff and tough and dangerous individuals. So now you've got this legion bolstered by even more barbaric killers in a way, but also have this innate sense of Fenris's honor and mythology, and so it's a boon for the Legion. And now, as the second Legion to have a Primarch appointed, the route goes from strength to strength.
Can I mention something really very space wolfy in terms of the lore? You know, with their gene seed curse. I mentioned this, I think, briefly in the
Wolfen.
Yeah, the Wolfen curse, briefly in the Primarchs podcast episode. Check that out. It's not called Wolfen because when they have their, if you're new to Warhammer, sometimes the gene seed that makes them into Astartes is not. The Emperor's put some weird stuff in there, and sometimes, as you can tell, they're space wolves. They look a bit wolfy sometimes. There's a gene seed curse for some of the legions, and the space wolves are one of the legions that have it as well. Although it could be argued quite a few of them, maybe all of them have it in some way, in terms of temperament. But the space wolves have one called the Wolfen, which means they kind of had the possibility of basically turning into werewolves. But they're not called Wolfen because they look like wolves. They're called Wolfen because one of the men of Russ, who joined him in becoming a space marine, he essentially held resentment in his heart for Leman Russ, and the trial for which becoming a space wolf, you have to go through the gates of Morkai, which are essentially they test you for taint, essentially from chaos. Essentially his dislike for, or his jealousy of Russ, allowed chaos into his heart, and he became the first Wolfen, and he attacked Russ. And his name was Wolfen. So that's why they're called Wolfen, because they're named after things that essentially felt.
I did not know that.
It's so
why can they not just resist the urge to be everything is actually named after this? It's not called this because like the land speeder. It's not called that because it speeds across the land. It's developed by Arkan Land. You don't need to do that, DW. You don't need to name everything after a person.
I just remember reading that. I think it was in the Ragnar Blackmane books. I remember thinking, what the hell? Because they meet Well, there's two stages of that curse. You can have like Wolfen where they just essentially their eyes start to glow yellow, and then they're a little bit more like wolf-like, and there's like full on they become savage beasts like actual werewolves and wolves, and that's why the joke of there are no. I mean, they can't say it anymore, can they? But GW or something. But you
There
can't.
are no wolves on Fenris.
I mean, they shouldn't say it, but they still will.
It's a joke because it's meant to imply that the like gene seed or supposedly they became the wolf, like the people became the wolves. Oh god, yeah, that's like I just find that funny little story of like they're called Wolfen because they named Arthur a dude, not because they actually look like wolves. Oh my god.
Why do they keep doing that?
Well,
So-
to be honest, I did a nearly 1 hour video on the Space Wolves talking about everything, and I've had several comments being like, "Take a shot for every time that the Remembrancer says wolf," and it's like, yeah, it's a lot. There's wolf kings
you'd
and
be dead.
wolfen and the 13 wolf spirits and the wolf packs and the lone wolves and it's like wolf 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 woof woof woof. Here come the Space Wolves. But I should mention that the reason I've said the route is because of their history as the carrion leaders of Terra, and the Vilka Fenrica is what they actually call themselves. They don't call themselves Space Wolves. That's basically a misinterpretation by the wider Imperium to go, oh, wolves, all the wolf trappings, pelts.
They're in
the wolves in
space.
Space wolves, and the Vilka Fenrica do not like it when people call them space wolves, but they are. So
like
they
the
should
White
get over
Scars,
it.
essentially, like we mentioned earlier.
Yeah, exactly. It's an interesting parallel. But it's not as on the nose, at least. It was like, oh god. Well, if you don't want to be called Space Wolves, why do you call your battalions Wolf Packs and Wolf Brothers? And why have you got the Wolfbane? And
Why
the
are you wearing a
Wolfblade?
wolf?
And why is your name Scarson Wolfenson? Like, yeah, it's just
Right,
an
that-
easy mistake to make.
That really is the most spot-on bit in TTS, where the Emperor's like, all I got out of that was wolf, 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 wolf.
But speaking of wolf, 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 Eli, I've put another quote in the sidebar. Would you fancy doing a read of that for me?
Yes, but I'm not gonna do a Space Wolf accent. Sorry, bro.
Okay, no worries.
Come on, break out the
Oh my
Norwegian.
gods!
I wish it would be too bad. I can't do it. All right. As the strands of iron are twisted and hammered together in the forging of a killing blade, so shall we be. And I and my oath sworn have been in... Hold up. I'm having the same issue. Okay. I and my oath sworn have been until now the wolves of Fenris, and you, cousins of my blood, the wolves of Terra. Together we shall become the wolves that stalk the stars, and the beasts that crawl and feed in the darkness of the void shall come to fear us, and know themselves hunted. Cool. I like the Space Wolves. Throwing
Literally
it out
call
there.
themselves the Wolves of Fenris, but call themselves Space Wolves is like
But no, you're not allowed.
Space Wolf is not my pronoun. It's literally that energy, and I don't get it.
Microaggression. You can't call me
It does
Space
feel
Wolf.
like that.
Well, I mean, again, they were known as the Jackals of Terra, and I know Horus didn't like the fact that people called them Space Wolves, because if you think about it, there's only two Primarchs at this point, and there's the Lunar Wolves and the Space Wolves, and Horus is like, that's my thing. Don't steal my thing. Come on.
Stomps on the ground. No.
Stomps on the ground, gets in a bit of a tiff.
Real
yeah.
reason for the Horus heresy.
Yeah, it's all about names, isn't it? So with that all done, Lehman Russ now has a very formidable legion at his behest. So as soon as he's installed to bring compliance across the galaxy for the Great Crusade, he embarks upon the Wheel of Fire frontier to the galactic east. And this is where the Vilka Fenrica would exterminate the Xenos and some human stragglers in that sector, but it was a particularly treacherous kind of campaign. They fought directly alongside the White Scars and their Primarch to destroy the Orkwar of Mashog, but they also fought alongside the Iron Warriors, but they didn't really commend them for their actions. They just called them comrades as support units. They were like, oh, White Scars and us, we did all the fighting. The Iron Warriors were just there and they helped. I was like, oh, that's a bit... Ooh,
Damn.
poor,
Roasted.
poor 4th Legion. I think the only thing they did was Perturabo helped plot the trajectory of their drop ship vectors, and they're like, yeah, that helped. You
I'm
didn't do
pretty
Oh,
any actual
sure
fighting.
Good job, Perturabo.
Perturabo's in the planning stage and is like Lehman Russ is already gone. He's already what? He's gone?
Yeah, basically. And Jagatai is already on the planet. They've already left. Oh my! The two most impetuous legions who are like, I'll do it now. which I find is funny that like Perturabo is just there with his arms folded, going fucking. Anyway, but during this campaign, the Space Wolves would lose about 1 Astartes per 1,000 orcs, which is pretty good odds. And through again this trial of blood and fire, they would be remolded in their Primarch's image, very much like the White Scars. However, the Space Wolves, probably more than any, would create a lot of rivalries against their cousin legions throughout the Great Crusade. And one of these would be particularly well known with the First Legion, the Dark Angels.
Doolan.
At this point,
I love this
yeah,
guy.
at this point, Leman Russ is already a little bit salty in that he's been there since more or less the beginning, and the Lions turned up quite late in the game. And the Dark Angels have more compliances than the Space Wolves. And Leman Russ isn't happy about this. He's like, I've been here since just after Horus, and this new upstart's here. And his Legion, although the Legion's already done a lot of stuff, since he's returned, he's killing it. I'm annoyed at this. So they're doing this compliance of this world called Doolan, and the planetary governor calls the Wolf King a swear. He calls him a swear, and he calls him fat or something. I don't know. He calls him a name, and then Leman Russ gets really
Lapdog of
annoyed.
the
He's like,
Emperor, I think is the exact word, isn't it? Lapdog of
Oh,
the
yeah,
Emperor.
Yes.
yeah, lapdog of the Emperor. And then he goes, I'm killing this man. So they go and they start fighting, and they do the warring. And Leman Russ gets to the capital city. He kicks in the door of the throne room where this planetary governor should be, and he sees the lion just standing over his dead corpse, as opposed to an alive corpse. He's standing over his corpse, and yeah, and
necromancy exists in these settings.
yeah,
Gotta be
Nagash is
careful.
not in this universe.
Unfortunately.
But Bortarian's dad is.
But yeah, and so Leman Russ isn't happy. His chance to redeem his honor is now non-existent. He can't avenge his pride, and so he gets into a bit of a kind of like, lion, how dare you kill this guy? I was gonna kill him. You kill you should have got an assist. You kill stealing me. And so lion's like, oh, shut up, and they get into a fight. It lasts over a day, and eventually. Long story short, Riemann goes, oh my god, why are we fighting? We've been at this for a day. We're so silly. We're goofy goobers. And then Lion goes, you call me a what? And he knocks him out. So then the Lion and the Dark Angels leave Doolan. The Space Wolves revive their Primarch from being unconscious, and then he's like, oh, where's the Lion? He just sucker punched me. He's like, oh, he's gone. And that basically starts a 10,000 plus year old feud between the Space Wolves and the Dark Angels. That's one feud for the books. They also would start a feud with the World Eaters during their Night of the Wolf, where the Emperor heard that Angron and his legion were implanting butcher's nails into their men, which is a big no-no because that's not a good idea by any stretch of the imagination. And so the Emperor dispatched Leman Russ and his Space Wolves to bring his order to stop doing that. And that was also following the Genna massacre, where the Butcher's Nails fueled Astartes of the World Eaters. They've already gone on a bit of a civilian killing rampage, so not good by any stretch of the imagination.
I think
because of
isn't
these
Gehenna's where they find the technology to make the Butcher's Nails work on the World Eaters before it just killed them all. Or just for reference, if people don't know, the Butcher's Nails are like a brain implant that
cortical
essentially
implant. Yeah.
it basically only lets adrenaline like kick in when you're essentially massacring people. So that's why the Emperor doesn't want it.
Big turns off the centers of your brain that aren't related to fighting
And rage.
Yeah, it's
like SpongeBob.
It blocks off your endorphin receptors, your serotonin receptors, anything you like. If you think of any time you've accomplished something or had a nice meal and it made you feel good, or you've done something nice, it's like you don't feel anything for doing any of that, and it's miserable.
Makes
and the
you
only
sad.
reason you feel happy is when you cut someone's face off. Like, oh, okay, that's what the butcher's nails do.
Yeah, it's like the fine dining and breathing. All they know is murdering and breathing.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, and because of these acts of censure, over time, a nickname would be attributed to the Vilca Fenrica and their Primarch. They would know the Wolf King as the Emperor's Executioner and his Dogs of War. And the 6th Legion would be infamous as a legion that quite possibly also got rid of the second and 11th legions of the lost and forgotten Primarchs. We don't really know much about them. It's heavily implied that the Rout were the ones who were the Damocles hammer, sword of Damocles over the neck of the Primarchs of the 2nd and 11th Legion. Though we're not sure, not much is known about it, but all that is known is that when something is really, 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 really egregious, then the Emperor calls the Wolves. He doesn't call the Dark Angels, who are the exterminators of the universe. He doesn't call the Ultramarines, who are the diplomats. He doesn't call the Blood Angels, who enable. He calls the Rout, because they're just going to kill whatever he tells them to do. And not in a way like the World Eaters, where they're going to shred them to bits and get a bit, like, caught up in the bloodlust. It's like, no, they're just going to do their duty, and then they're going to leave. And that's kind of the reason he made them. That's why they're one of the Trefoil. They were made as his enforcers. And to an extent, this is also one of their biggest flaws in personality, because they are held in high esteem by the Emperor personally, and they are very proud of their situation and their relationship to the Master of Mankind. This would fuel a lot of their actions leading up to the Horus Heresy, one of which being their compliance alongside the Thousand Sons during the Arc-Reach Cluster campaign, where the 15th Legion were bringing compliance to the world using their oogly-boogly psychic powers, until some of the members of the Thousand Sons started turning into abominations with a curse known as the Flesh Change. And Leman Russ was not happy about this. He saw it as heresy and abominable, warp manipulations, and he basically just culled all the flesh-changing Thousand Sons. He almost went into a full-scale war with the Thousand Sons without the intervention of Lorgar Aurelian and the Wordbearers as like intermediaries. Like, Daddy, chill, just standing between the two Primarchs. It was like that was
what
that
the
was
hell is that
nearly,
thing?
that was basically Leman Russ going, looking at a Space Marine turning into the flesh. Like, what the hell is even that? Yes,
I love that scene though, because there's a bit where it's because they're Magnus is like guarding one of the libraries of the world. He's saying, "You're not allowed to touch this. This is mine." And the Space Wolves are like, they're like huddled together like American football players, like, oh, you know what I mean? They're like running together, and they're about to slam into the Thousand Sons, but no one's got their weapons drawn. All the Space Wolves have their shields out, and essentially they have their like physical shields, and the Thousand Sons have their psychic shields, and they literally slam together in a shield wall. And they're not firing at each other. They're just like, essentially, it's a match of wills.
How much can we get away with?
It was like a test of wills, and so like all the Thousand Sons are just using their magics. There's not as many of them as the Space Wolves, but the Space Wolves are like just shoving, and they're essentially matched, and it's a really cool basically it's a really nice imagery of like the two, like a historic shield walls just like clashing against each other. Although definitely 40k'd up a bit.
Yeah, and the Router going, they're reading books, burn them. They're reading books, nerds.
Nerd.
For this reason, they were a very contentious legion. They had a lot of bad blood with a lot of legions and Imperial armed forces. They were definitely like, you wouldn't want to cross them, but you also wouldn't want to say anything bad about them in case they like said, oh, what did you say? And they like sharpen their axes, very scary dudes. But they would also be extremely valuable to the Imperium. They helped out with the Rangdar genocides, where they slew untold horrors across the deepest, darkest voids of the galaxy, killing some of the most disgusting and dangerous creatures that Imperial records don't have any records on, because to even just think about these things is probably enough to drive people mad. So they go, no, just kill them, we don't need to know the details. Cool, that's another Imperial Agri world saved. That's good. And they always served their so-called All-Father diligently. The Space Wolves never falter in their loyalty to the Imperium, even though they're regarded as barbarians by the rest of the citizenry of humanity. They are relentless in their conquests. They've never betrayed the Emperor. They never betray the Imperium, even in the bleakest circumstances. And that's why the Rout have a checkered past, but also are, even in the 41st millennium, upheld as one of the most reliable of all the founding legions and chapters. Because when you need something to get done You call the route. It will get done. It won't be pretty. It won't be virtuous, but it'll get done. And that's basically what they were up to during the Great Crusade.
I love the part where Colin's going to really enjoy this one. The Space Wolves wear, like, they wear lots of like furs and cloaks and talisman and things like that. There's a bit in the Great Crusade where they fight alongside the Thousand Sons, and they are on this planet, and it's scorching hot. This planet, like, even the Thousand Sons are using their psychic powers to like cool themselves down because it's that hot, and they're struggling. But when they're marching up this mountain, the Space Wolves next to them, covered in furs and cloaks and everything, are completely fine. And then like the Thousand Sons kind of go, why are they like all like fine? And essentially they come to like, oh, it's the gene seed. Something about their gene seed helps them deal with extreme environments. So even though it's basically they don't need to wear the furs in extreme cold, they just do it, and they wear the furs in extreme heat too. Because they can.
Like when you see pictures of Rob Zombie in a leather jacket in California at like summertime, you're like, dude, take the jacket off. It's obviously warm. It's okay.
They are literally,
you don't have to look.
They're the kid in school who wears the hoodie on the hottest day of the year. Like that's their like vibe. And I remember just seeing that, and it's so annoying because like, God, like, come on. Their G seed actually is pretty, like, when it works, they're not turning to wolves. Actually, probably one of the most OP out of all the gene seeds in terms of like, like a base space wolf is probably better than most of the other legions in terms of just a base character.
If it weren't for that big old asterisk.
Yeah, and also the failure rate is pretty high, I think, with the
Space
wolves.
Even when, like I said, even when they were during the Unification Wars, like most of them died. So it's like you only get maybe 3 in 10 become Astartes or whatever it is, like, or 3 in 100. But you're going to be good warriors.
Yeah, but I thought you'd enjoy that little tidbit there, Colin.
Yeah, I mean that's
the vibe.
To be fair, it is drip or drown in all cases.
That's right.
It's stupid. Don't get me wrong, but if in a fictional realm such as this, if given the choice between dripped out or sensible clothing, it's no choice at all.
Very true.
That's a good point.
I don't think the wolf pelts look particularly good, especially those damned helmets of theirs.
The wolf helmets. Yeah, they're a little bit too
We don't talk about the helmets.
Not enough Viking, too much wolf. Pain.
I know. I think the thing that gets my goat with the Space Wars is when they have the shields with like the wood on the front. It's like, why would you have wood? Like metal shields. Like you can carry it. It's not going to be heavy.
It's aesthetic, bro.
I'm sure
there's oak shields. That was from plasma bolt.
I'm
sure if you look hard enough. Yeah, I was gonna say there's some passage where it's like it's not just wood. It's that the rare adamantine tree from the non-existent jungle of Fenris or some shit like
from
that.
Odin's arsehole.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, it's fair enough with the White Scars where they make their staffs for the Stormseers with the wood from the bark of the trees from the Kumkata Mountains.
It's because they're wizards.
Yeah, it's because they're Stormseers. But like the White Scars don't go around like, I'm gonna carry a sword with like a blade made of bamboo shoots. Like, no, it's like it wouldn't be effective. Like, why would you use anything that grows rather than like metal? Ugh, I don't know. The wolf aesthetic is cool, but still.
Let's not say too much about growing. You grow wraithbone, and that shit's pretty good.
Yeah, but that's That's like adamantium or like
that is
fun
fair.
fantasy stuff.
That's also magical elf material.
So is ceramite.
Yeah, but
is ceramite grown?
No, as in like it's basically it's fancy made up. It's not.
But like plasteel and ceramite and stuff. At least it's like it's manufactured. But it's like I'm just gonna put wood on my shield. Like no. I don't care. I don't care if it's like steel bark or whatever you're going to call it. Like it's made of trees.
Maybe it's the greatest kept secret of the wolves that they're such good painters that they just paint their shields to look like it's made of.
Spray on wood
stupid.
I don't think any of them live long enough to be good artists. That's the problem.
Just getting like expert painters like in the Warhammer painting community there with like the shield, like, all right, and this is how you do the pattern, and you use this with the brush stroke, so it looks like bark. You see, and they're like, oh, I do see. That's pretty cool.
For every like savage and executioner style Space Wolf. There's, you know, 1 in every 1,000 is like a Bob Ross style Space Wolf. He's like, just gonna go cull some Xenos over there. Nice trees.
Isn't there like a cool
trees
cool
on the
passage
side.
Isn't there a cool passage in one of the Horus Heresy books where like the salamanders work alongside the Space Wolves, and one of the salamanders, he's like, oh, my pauldron's damaged, and he's like, oh, we could like put you're one of our brothers, we could put a wolf there instead. And he's like, no, like we do that ourselves, we do our painting by our own artificers. And then by the end of the book, he's like, all right, go on, and then he like he scratches like a wolf head into the side, and it's like, oh, that's pretty cool.
Siege of Terra, Fury of Magnus, I think it is. One of the Space Wolves is like, can I carve a little, you know, now we're brothers, can I carve a Space Wolf symbol onto your pauldron? Because they do that. And
can I put a little wolfie?
And then the salamander goes, because the Salamanders Legion have to, they basically, most of them like forge, or at least they maintain their own equipment, and they paint their own armor.
They venerate craftsmanship as like part of their identity.
So it is like a guy saying, can I just put my, you know, tape a banana onto a wall next to the Van Gogh, essentially?
It's like that one lady that tried to fix up like the Mona Lisa or some other art.
Oh my god, the Jesus, the Jesus in the thing, and it looked like Jesus, but blurred. Yeah.
Where it's like, it was done with the best of intentions. You are making it worse in every regard.
That looked like someone, like Jesus was a cake and someone sat on it, essentially.
I don't know, I just love the idea of like the salamander's got this pauldron of like immaculate dragon head design with filigree, and then like underneath it's just like a stick figure wolf that the Space Wolf's been like, that's an arm and some fingers. There he is. He's a happy little doggo.
He was trying. He was trying to make friends.
It's like giving a kid a marker pen in a friend's house, and he's like, go nuts, and he just starts drawing on the walls.
Exactly.
Do you think the Emperor in like his golden fridge ever put up one of Lehman's artworks like on the front? He's like, very good, Lehman. Good job.
I like to think that.
It's like that. There's that meme of like Conrad Kurz and the Emperor. It's like, what are you writing there, Conrad? It's like, this is a list of people who love me. Oh, that's great. Cross me out. And he crosses him out, and it's blank, and he just cries.
Then he kicks it. I remember.
Oh, man. Next episode. But I believe if that's all we're going to talk about with the 5th and the 6th Legion, it's Colin's time to give us a fisting. So
Could I
your best.
Could I quickly dive back to the Wolves just to talk slightly a bit about because I love Lehman's original story of how he was found by the Emperor.
Oh God.
This is just my favorite thing ever. So, you know, the Emperor was being Odin, so he took the guise of an old wizened man. He shows up to Lehman as he's the king of Fenris, and he's reveals himself, and he challenges him to contest, because Lehman's like, I'm not just gonna serve you. You gotta prove that you're worth it. So, you know, the Emperor, you know, he wins the first couple of challenges. You know, no sweat. He's the Emperor. And then they get to an eating and a drinking contest, and the Emperor simply cannot win because Lehman is going full Viking. He is too good at eating and drinking. The Emperor's like, what's going on? I can't win. And as Lehman is laughing and gloating, he just clocks him on the head and knocks Lehman out.
I like, and then it's something along the lines of he's like, "Oh, you're just a fat pig who drinks and eats all day." And he's like, "What?" And then he goes into like an actual like fighting trial with the Emperor going like, "You gluttonous, like, sitting in your gaming chair, eating popcorn all day. Oh,
stupid,
so
dumb
disappointed."
alcoholic.
My man, you look like the toy repairer from Toy Story 2 or something.
Yeah, he was a cool guy.
Bro, that scene where he actually repairs Woody is still pretty elite, but
I love that scene.
But he's still an absolute...
It's amazing. He's just like new.
What a weird twist of Toy Story 2 / Warhammer crossover.
Can't wait for Buzz Lightyear to get his own Space Marine chapter. That'd be so good.
I've seen people paint him in that style.
Yeah, I've seen that.
It actually looked really good. But we'll cover the Star Rangers, or whatever they were called, that chapter later. For now, it is time for the Legions, the 7th Legion, the Imperial Fists. Their Primarch is, of course, Rogaldorn, the one and only. And as a quick side note, I know some people say the Fists are rather boring, and I get where it comes from, but I don't know. I like them, although admittedly, I like them largely because of how I play strategy games. One, the thing they're most famed for is fortifying the ever-loving like hell out of everything they go.
Fortify.
Yeah.
Siege.
As someone who is allergic to aggressive gameplay in a strategy game, I appreciate that. I'm a big fan of just turtling and fortifying until no one can bother me in my little corner of the map.
Unfallen pilled.
I love my trees, Eli. What can I say?
My man would not make it in competitive Age of Empires.
Nah,
Favors are coming to eat you alive.
Not if I grow. Not if you get caught by pirates in your first sector. To get away from endless space. The second reason I like them is the Fists, they're reliable. With their gene seed, it's actually very stable. There's not really any mutations. About the only thing they've lost over time is the Becher's gland, so they can't spit acid, which, given that most of the time Space Marines have a helmet, doesn't really matter. That would only be harmful to them to be using that like 99.9% of the time. And the sus and membrane, Among Us roll reveal sound effect, which keeps them from entering like hibernation, stasis mode, however you want to think it is. And even beyond that, when they show up, you know what you're going to get. You're going to get the experts in fortification. They're going to build the best damn fortress you've ever seen. And they're going to go crusade and beat the hell out of everyone around them. Which, again, influenced by my strategy game likings and tactics. But I like the classic, reliable, you have this, you know exactly what you're going to get. And that's what the Fists were. They were not the most, perhaps the most, I don't know, glamorous tool in the shed, but they're reliable. You know what's going on, and you're going to get good results with them.
Like a
So, yeah, hey, and you can build a hell of a fortress with a trowel as long as you have long enough. As for what they were doing early on, as with all other legions, they would start on Terra. Unlike the other ones, though, the Fists were not really drawn from a specific location or type of Terran people. They drew from Terra as a whole, to the point that even if, like, say, I don't know, let's say Hive America, or whatever they call the U.S., like America in 40K, is like, say that's belongs mostly to one Space Marine Legion, the Fists are still gonna scoop a little bit under on the side, a couple of those recruits, even if say that belongs to the Dark Angels or Ultramarines or something. They're like, we're gonna take some of these. About the only major commonality between the Fist recruits is that they were endurance focused, so they're going to see the job until it is done, no matter what, and they're rather taciturn in nature. Has anyone here ever watched Dragon Ball Z Abridged?
Oh my god, it's been a hot minute.
Do you know the joke about Tien where they're always like, I can never read that guy?
Oh, it's been so long, man. I don't know.
Well, I don't know. That's what, when I was reading, that's the image I got in my head for the Fists. So they're like very taciturn, stern, go about their job, and that's about it. That's the image I got in my head for them.
They're permanently squinting. I don't know why. It's such a
like
weird...
Clint Eastwood.
Oh, like Bill Clinton for a second there. It's like, all I need to do is build some fortifications.
Don't know what. I didn't draw that connection.
God, we're a bit too political.
The reason for them being taken from like all across the planet isn't completely known, but the process of implanting their gene seed was apparently incredibly painful and just inflicted great suffering on the implantee. So it could have been a way of just hedging their bets, as it were. So it's like, listen, a lot of you are going to die going through this. So if we just take everyone we can, someone won't die. At least a couple of you aren't going to die from this horribly invasive procedure. A bit more poetic reason could be, they're Terra's Legion. They draw from all across Terra. If you'd like to be a bit more poetic about it, a bit more reasonable, is that, it just killed so many people, they got to take what they can get. They went across Terra, and as all the Space Marine Legions, well, not all of them, but many of them, had some great victories under their belt. When I was reading something that was briefly mentioned, a single sentence was the battle for the Crystal Sea, the Imperial Fists won, which couldn't find any detail on it beyond the name, but hey, it sounds really cool. So whatever you might imagine that is, the Imperial Fist got a dub there. And they even fought in the Himalayas themselves, around the capital of the Emperor's realm, or the Himalayas as they call them in 40k for some reason.
I just realized you said Crystal Sea. There's no more oceans left on Terra, so where the hell was that?
I'm guessing maybe it was some psyker thing. It's one of those 40k lore things. Like, damn, that sounds cool. I wish it was more than just a sentence.
I need a cool name, something. Checks list, something. Just discount names or something.
And the one that I took biggest note from was in the Himalayas, where they fought against a group of psychers and took some pretty heavy losses, but proved victorious, which is a testament to their endurance. They fought against magicians, and the Imperial Fists are fortifiers and crusaders, not really known for their librarians and whatnot, and they still prove victorious despite the onslaught of evil wizards. So they're very good at what they do, and frequently they would employ themselves at many times the strength of the average chapter. And I know they're legions, but chapters were still groups. During the legions, it was just like a subgroup of a legion. They would deploy themselves at many times, not quite full strength, but close to it, to make sure that whatever they're fighting, it's gone. It's not going to be a problem for long. Just to completely crush them. And they did sure enough set up many fortresses across Terra. But unlike what you might think, they did not man them for very long, because something people forget about the Imperial Fists, especially compared to their 40k incarnation, is that they were crusaders. They didn't just sit behind their walls. They built them, made sure they were garrisoned, and then went out to the next conquest. Because the fortresses were as much a fortress as they were a message. It was this great looming thing, towering over the people they recently conquered as a message of, hey, we're going to come back if you don't behave. So the Imperial Fists were perhaps not as good as, Lorgar or Gilliman, and like things like diplomacy and making sure people get are brought over to their side. But if push comes to shove, they can make a good threat when they really need to. And a castle's a damn good threat, if I say so myself. Whew, pardon me. And their name even comes from their actions here, with this fortress and whatnot. People said it was as if the Emperor descended upon the land and clamped it with an unbreakable fists, which is where he gave them their name, the Imperial Fists. And I do have to say that Imperial Fist does sound cooler than the Unbreakable Fist. I don't know, how do you guys feel about that? Just flows off the tongue a little bit better, I feel
Fist
like.
Sounds like a monk subclass in D&D or something.
Yeah, it's like it flows off the tongue a bit better, Imperial Fist, I feel like.
Now that I know the story behind it, it does sound better, but when it first hits you, like Imperial Fist doesn't really... I mean, Black Templars hit a little bit harder than just Imperial Fist. But now that I kind of know how it originates, it sounds a little bit like, ooh, a little more hardcore.
Yeah, that's fair.
I do also like the there's like a bit I remember reading a while back about during the Unification Wars. They were said that the Imperial Fist's bodies were part of like the foundations of the fortifications they built. Mm-hmm. So like when someone would fall, they would build around their like body, and it's like, we are in the walls. We're literally in the walls. That's how fortified we are, and it blesses our buildings.
Walls.
With their sacrifice. You're like, oh, they're pretty hardcore.
And that's even fitting, because a lot of times they were called the bedrock of the Imperium, considered as such as it were.
Shout out to all the people who are fortifying the like button whilst they're listening to this video. Any chance to say fortify the like button, to be fair. In any video, any opportunity is needed.
Fortify the like button and lay siege to the subscribe button.
Lay siege to the subscribe button. Do it!
When the Emperor gave them the name Imperial Fists, they accepted it in a manner very fitting to themselves, silently with little to say on the matter, and they're like, thank you, Big E, for the name. We're going to go off and shoot someone again. And now the fists are off. Terra is largely conquered, and it's time to deal with that issue of the Primarchs, who again, theirs, as with all except one of the others, Alfarius, I guess, was hiding in a cabinet somewhere on Terra the whole time. They had to go get him back after they were stolen away by the Chaos Gods and or their mother, who thought Big E was a bit of a dickhead, depending on whether or not you want to acknowledge Urda. And so the Great Crusade for the Fists had the same objectives as most of the other legions: conquer the galaxy for humanity and find their Primarch. And they set about. And I believe it was, if you do please correct me on this, but after several decades, they found Rogel Dorn on Inuit. He was the 7th Primarch found, which, hey, 7th Primarch for the 7th Legion. And they found him, along with, the Emperor and whatnot. He came to go find his kid. And what would soon become their fortress monastery, and almost their second homeworld, the massive Dark Age station known as the Phalanx, was given to the Fists and Rogel Dorn. So they're coming together pretty swiftly as we know them from 40k. They've got the Phalanx, they're Terra's Legion. They, I feel like more than a couple of the others, kind of took shape into what they would become in 40k quicker than a lot of the other legions. Not quite the same, but...
For the audio listeners, can you describe slightly what the Phalanx looks like? Because it's hard to... You've seen it in like Battlefleet Gothic, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, it's... Massive doesn't even begin to cover it. It is this unbelievably gargantuan space station from, like I said, the dark age of technology when stuff was just straight up better. So it had the best equipment, the best guns, the best shields, the best armor plating, the best of anything you could possibly want on a space station. And it's basically so big that I believe even when they were a legion, just the Astartes wouldn't be able to man all of it, because again, I cannot understate enough how damn big the Phalanx is. It is.
It looks like
fitting...
a cross church, doesn't it? Sort of design, but then it's a little bit Death Star-y in terms of
that's
to it.
But yeah, by 40k, like when it makes its appearance in Battlefleet Gothic, it's a massive like round big space station with cathedrals on it. I just don't wonder.
I think I've once described it to a friend of mine as, imagine the Holy Roman Empire as a ship. Just put the entire empire.
That's a pretty good way of putting it.
Combine it, stick it together, and it's floating in space, and it's got big spires, and it's got more guns and more docking ports than anything. It's the biggest ship ever, and it's pretty cool.
Look at a map of Germany in the Middle Ages, and then just put it in the sky. You have the Phalanx.
Now I can imagine some Habsburg chin-looking mother effer who's just like rubbing his, inbred chin and being like, "That looks like a nice spaceship you got there." You know what I mean?
they say that Rogel Dorn's continued survival confused the Imperium at large. I love that bit about Charles II of Spain.
And his uncle was his cousin, was his dad.
We do not have time to get into Habsburg genetics. You need a PhD to figure that out.
Well, it's not really a tree; it's more of a circle. But still,
it's a family Christmas wreath. But hey, they found their Primarch, and it's about to scale up in operations, because I believe I've read, for 16 decades Rogel Dorn led the Imperial Fists, which, in case that slips by ya, that's 160 years of the galaxy getting a good fist in from Rogel Dorn and his children. Pardon me. Ayo.
That was a hell of a sentence.
Yep. So he accepted his legion. He came about, took charge, and it was time to do what the Fists were known for galaxy-wide. Their reputation as the stalwart defenders and crusaders of mankind would only only blow up from here. Something I really took note, I really found interesting, was that Horus himself, at one point, was noted saying if he ever had to attack the Imperial Fists, like in a war, he would not win. He would say that the Fists were simply so good at fortifying, defending locations that it would be a never-ending stalemate.
Something along the lines of the Masters of Defense versus the Master of shock attacks, and it would just be a stalemate.
Yeah, it would be an endless meat grinder for all eternity. And of course, something I feel I should remind people is that in a defensive war, a tie is a victory for the defender, which essentially means Horus could not win. He would not achieve victory, he would lose. Because the defender just has to sit behind the walls and wait for the attacker to die or go away. So, as far as I'm concerned, that means Rogaldorn would be able to beat Horus if push came to shove. Do with that what you will. That one is a bit more of me saying that, but Horus saying I could not beat him, that is canon. Like Andy said, the masters of defense versus the masters of offense and shock assault. A further note is that despite this reputation they have for being just stalwart and reliable in their conquests, they weren't brain dead. It wasn't like, it's like, oh, I'm going to build a siege, and if the siege doesn't turn out, it's like, well, guess we're done here, call another legion. It's like, no, they were not completely immune to, flashes of inspiration, like, wait, we should actually do this. This would be a much better plan. Which in my mind is what really differentiates them from the Ultramarines, who they're also renowned for being quite disciplined and being able to follow battle plans to the letter. Because the way I think of it is, for example, the Ultramarines, they're probably going to be able to execute a battle plan better than the Fists ever could. But when something comes up that the Ultramarines do not have a plan for, maybe they've not lost the war, but they're definitely going to lose that battle. It's not going as the simulation said. So the Ultramarines are going to lose. Whereas the Fists, maybe it'll hurt, but they could have one trick up their sleeve to attain victory. They might pull something out of their sleeves and be like, "Hey, I can do this." What's up?
There is an interesting parallel with that example. Like, you got Alexis Pollux, who was a captain who during the Horus Heresy was extremely good at naval warfare. But he was somewhat mentored by his predecessor to be like, oh, he's unconventional, but he's got a good idea. Whereas the Ultramarines, Aeonid Fiel was being marked for censure for thinking outside the box. And in a similar instance, he only helped the Ultramarines survive that encounter by breaking the rules and doing his own thing. And they were both very much in a similar rank, in a similar position, and a similar environment. The methodology changed.
Alexis Pollux dies off screen.
I know. It's so
I saw a meme about that.
Hey,
today.
we're not there yet. Don't worry.
That's a bit of a spoiler. There's also a good.
It's not a spoiler though, because it's not in the book.
Yeah. There's a good comparison with the Ultramarines here as well, where the Imperial Fists as well as the Ultramarines had a section of the Legion that was filled with, I guess, members who didn't really necessarily fit the overall Legion culture. So the example in the Imperial Fist ones would be the soldiers who would eventually become like the Black Templars, which are like the ones like Sigismund, which are essentially the ones who are not like they're okay defending, but there's a section of the Imperial Fist like I'm definitely okay with going on the offensive here, and they're a bit more kind of like Dawn's attack dogs, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that matches up with like the reputation they're getting. They're not just defenders; they're crusaders. They go out and conquer. Especially like you said, the Sigismund and the Templar Brethren, thinking the Imperial Fists are only good at like shooting and hunkering behind walls was probably the last thought of many a planet who thought they could take them before Sigismund tore ass through their front line and shoved a power sword into their head.
It's also crazy that they had, I think the Imperial Fist, despite having what would be like the most generic / safest gene seed in terms of like other legions had specialties and like boosts that they got, like each warrior got from their gene seed. The Imperial Fist didn't have that, but yet they produced some of the best warriors in terms of actual combat. Like even that Sigismund is literally considered the best space marine who's ever lived in terms of combat. He was literally undefeatable and he killed pretty much every one he ever came
out Abaddon.
And they have the coolest successor chapters.
They do. Unfortunately,
what, you don't think the Nova Marines are cool?
Okay.
Or the
Like
not the Genesis. I meant the Genesis.
Oh yeah, sure.
The Genesis chapter. I was trying to make a joke about the bargain brand Ultramarines, and I said the wrong
good
one.
Old Genesis. Good old raspberries. Gotta love them.
Also, everyone is racist in 40k. That's not a standout
Yeah,
quality.
I think the Nova
cool.
Marines are like
Knights,
extra.
Oh, this Knight's aired. Never mind. It's alright. We hate Xenos here.
All right.
Super
buddy.
Gene Stealers. I love Gene Stealers.
You're about to do.
What about the
Xenos
Necrons?
soon. Yeah, I say.
And Necrons.
And
Yeah, I hate Xenos, which is everyone other than Necrons. So
How can you
still Xenos.
That's fair.
Necrons are more like, like appliances. They're like laptops or like a toaster.
Hey. You will suffer a celestial orrery to the face for such comments. But yeah, the Fists, they They weren't like the whole point of what I was going with. They're not a one-trick pony. They can fight perfectly fine. Something else fitting is some Rogel Dorn even was criticizing Alfarius for. He's not unaware of other methods of war than, fortress building and a crusading assault. Pardon me. At one point, he chews out Alfarius for using just horrible tactics, but he does it by Alfarius' own standards. Because Alfarius had just basically killed an entire noble population of a planet at once. And Rogel Dorn, instead of being like, oh, you should have bunkered behind a wall and laid siege, he was like, listen, by your own metrics, you messed up because there are infinitely more effective, surgical strikes and tactics you could have done to get this done, but you chose to go for the shock value of, kill everyone at once, which maybe, worked, but it was the most inefficient, costly, unnecessarily brutal way you could have gone about it. So it's not that he doesn't understand. He's a living brick wall, Rogel Dorn, but I think it's fair to say he's choosing to specialize in what he knows best, rather than just being unable to do other methods of warfare.
I think also ethically he says, because that's a really good scene with Alfarius, I think he also states that the reason he chooses to fight the way he does and the Imperial Fists do was because whoever they fight, they choose to fight. They're warriors, they're soldiers, so they don't kill innocents and things like that. Mm-hmm. They essentially they're they literally are two empires clashing and warriors fighting each other. So they're fighting people who are willing to step up and actually take the role of being a soldier, not people who are not involved in that, or not in a dishonorable way. So they, even though maybe more people would die, but they're people who are willing to actually, put their life on the line rather than people who didn't want to be involved.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they were. Rogel Dorn was definitely one of the more morally upstanding of the Primarchs. Granted, not the hardest bar to pass, for what that's worth, but he usually did not just blow his way into civilian compounds as a way to achieve victory, because it'd be quicker. Like you said, he fought warriors of other empires. He wasn't going to, a refugee center and blowing it to hell because it was more efficient than not. And where was I? Pardon me. I would say I also think it makes sense that he knows about all the other methods of war. Because if you want to build a fortress, it's more than just 4 walls and a square and then you're done. You got to know weak points. You got to know how the enemy could get in, methods of keeping it supplied. I think it makes sense that Rogel Dorn isn't just all siege or fortify. He's got more to him than just that. He just chooses to specialize in fortifications and whatnot. As for a bit more on the Imperial Fists and their crusading.
Chris.
Have you met my friend Imperial Chris?
Imperial Chris. Only one dude.
He's one of the lesser known captains of the Fists, the Imperial Chris.
Why is it the name Chris makes no sense in a Warhammer setting? There's no one called Chris in Warhammer. I swear.
You could get Christos, but not Chris.
Christos is just Chris.
I've had Jordan how jarring that would be. Horus, Abaddon, Chris, Ezekiel.
We'd never get no. You get Eli Janus, but you wouldn't get a Colin, Andy, or Harry.
I would say it
wouldn't happen.
The Colin Marine.
Colin would just. I don't know what legion that would go in though.
Smurfs.
Yeah.
Put me in the blueberries.
Probably. Colin Aurelius.
That ain't too bad. But as for how he led his legion and how they would act, Dorn was not the kind of guy to push his legion in places he wouldn't go. He demanded perfection, and not in the way Fulgrim did, but he demanded they give it their all and do it right. But that's because he demanded that of himself, and he wasn't putting additional expectations onto his sons, is I think the best way to put it. He wasn't asking them anything more than he asks of himself. He did ask them to give everything they had, but he was right there alongside with them, giving them their all. And he was also a bit of an idealist. He firmly believed in the Emperor's vision. He thought this was genuinely the best way to go for humanity. So he wasn't just crusading for the sake of war and bloodshed and conquest. He genuinely was like, this is what we need to do to create the safest, best future for humanity. Granted, this was not always seen, especially his attitude towards his brothers, because he was if he had any major flaw, it was his complete and utter lack of people skills. He did not know how to talk to his brothers. I believe he did wanted to know, or he did know what he wanted to say. He could not get it out. He did not have Horus's or Sanguinius's or even Gilliman's charisma. He was a living brick wall.
I think all the Imperial Fists were very much just like they're perfect soldiers, not exactly more than that at this point.
Yeah.
Although eventually
I think that
one day, after the Great Crusade and Dawn's ideal world.
And they also follow their dad's example to a T, because again, Dawn was like, oh, he had no ambitions to become War Master. He was just like, I'm just going to do what the Emperor says. I'm going to do compliances. Job done, enough said. And his sons were like, yes, father, that is very good. Yes, I will do the same. Glory to the Imperium.
Yeah, and it's like, it's probably its biggest like foil to Perturabo, the traitorous siege and that kind of warfare expert. Perturabo wanted more credit and glory and stuff. He wanted better jobs than just grinding through the muck. Whereas I'm willing to bet that if like the Emperor came down to Rogal Dorn and the Fist and was like, "Hey, I need you for the next 10 years. You just got to be a janitor. You just got to clean space stations for 10 years." They'd be like, "Well, this is what the Emperor needs," and that is the end of the argument.
I don't know if you're going to mention it as well, but even when Horus was appointed as War Master, he would counsel with Rogal Dorn specifically, because he was like, I can trust Rogal to like figure out where my weaknesses are, and he's a great advisor because he's not going to try and like usurp my authority. He's not going to detract. He's just going to go, this could improve, that could improve, that's good, and he'll just leave it as it is. Like that's pretty. And again, he was very supportive. He was like, yes, you are a good War Master. I'll do my bit. Until it all went wrong.
And sure enough, that was pretty much his reaction when Horus was crowned as the War Master between the Fists and Rogal Dorn. There wasn't any like vying like, damn, I should have got that, or it wasn't like, yeah, Horus is the best guy for the job. He's like, well, the Emperor made it so. That is the end of the discussion as far as I care. Horus is War Master. I'm going to keep doing my job and help him out when he requires it.
Can I also mention an interesting tidbit about the actual Legion that,
of course,
even as Colin mentioned earlier, they kind of drew from everywhere on Terra. They actually, interesting enough, continued this practice into the Great Crusade, where they would draw, even though Rogal Dorn was found on the planet of Inuit, and many legionaries were drawn from there, such as big Crimson Fist boy Alexis Pollux. They actually would draw from many other worlds throughout the entire Imperium / worlds they conquered. So they would famously have legionaries from Necromunda, which is essentially almost like a gang hive world, which is
Scum Planet.
Yeah, there's like a game mode in Warhammer which is just set in Necromunda as a tabletop game. And so the Imperialists would draw from many different worlds. So the actual makeup of the legions, like general culture, was pretty like, it was its own thing rather than it was like the White Scars we said earlier, where they kind of like, oh, it's basically Chagorius, or the Space Wolves are basically Fenris. This was the Imperial Fists are like their own thing, like, like a knightly order sort of style.
Yeah, and it kind of reflects in how the way they would administer worlds in a way, because they essentially didn't, for lack of a better word. So when they conquered a world, they would do as they did on Terra, set up grand fortresses and make sure they had garrisons and whatnot. And they would occasionally like recruit from it. Like I think there was one instance I read where they took half of an Underhive's like male population to try out for Fist recruitment, which I think is one of those things. I don't think GW realized just how many people were going to become Fist with that, because they should have been the largest legion by a long shot with half of an Underhive's worth of people. Even if like 90% of them die and wash out, that's still a lot of people, like billions. But beyond that, once they set up the fortresses and took like the one-time manpower boost they had, they would leave, because again, Crusaders, that's something I really want to emphasize, because people, think of the Imperial Fists, they sit behind a wall and wait. They were, especially in the 30th millennium, they were Crusaders. They went out and conquered. And they didn't really claim anything as, strictly speaking, like Imperial Fist territory. Like other legions, when they would, conquer it, they'd be like, this is my planet to get tithes from for Space Marines. It belongs to the Imperium, but it also belongs to me, my legion. The Imperial Fists were like, give me the recruits I need to make up for the losses in the campaign. You belong to the Imperium. We're off. Don't rebel, or we're going to be back.
I do also like that when they do recruitment, they're not stuck up about who they recruit. They're like, if you're an Underhive ganger, you can join. It's like, if you have the grit and determination, you can be an Imperial Fist. And they have like a long history of they take the gutter trash and they make them into noble Astartes. And that's like a big thing for them, was like, you're more than you think you are. So we're going to make you the best. It's not going to be pretty. It's going to take a lot of work. It's going to take a lot of discipline, but we'll make you into an Astartes. And I think that's quite cool about them as well.
Yeah, they were definitely not stuck up about their recruiting practices. They took who they felt was the best, be it an Underhive ganger, like you said. If a noble really wanted to be a fist, they'd probably let him in too, if he could stick it out. And then they were on to the next crusade. For 160 years, this continued on, building these fortresses, moving on, and just expanding the Emperor's realm. Because again, they felt across the Legion, from Dorne to the average grunt, they were idealists. They felt this was the best future they were making for humanity. There's even a quote Rogel Dorn said himself that kind of reflects this, that he wants recruits, not vassals. It's part of why he doesn't like create an Imperial Fists mini empire within the Imperium itself. He's like, I want recruits. I don't want a nation of serfs and slaves. Skill issue on Rogel Dorn's part. Oh, please, what's the difference? You're still a serf for the Imperium now, it's just the fists don't get to benefit.
True.
Although, along this, I do have a quote I felt quite fitting that I'll bring up in a moment. One crucial trait of Dorn's that would spread throughout his Legion is that he viewed pain as a cleansing tool.
Oh.
I know it's frequently, portrayed in a joking manner, especially think of it like in TTS. The pain glove. Where it feels like your body is submerged in like liquid fire and napalm, and it's just incredibly pain and torturous. This would, when they got Rogel Dorn back, this would spread something else throughout Imperial Fist culture, that pain isn't just, ouch, that hurts. It's a method of cleansing the body of weakness.
God, they really do take it seriously, don't they? The flagellation.
Yeah, which do not take that to heart for the real world. These are Imperial Fist Crusaders. For the love of God, that is not how it works in reality. No, well, I mean, unless you're working out, no pain, no gain then, but otherwise do not be like the Fists in this regard. And I have a quote. Hal, you...
I'm ready if you want me to read it.
Indeed. Yeah, it was Hal, and Eli read the last. Yeah, Hal, a quote for it in general, if you wouldn't mind, from Rogely Don himself.
Rogelius Adonius. Do not look to us for kindness. Do not look to us for hope. We are not the kind children of this new age. We are the rocks of its foundation. If you wish hope, then look to what we make. If you wish kindness, then look to those who will come after us.
Yeah, so...
Building.
What's up?
It's all very future building, future focused.
Indeed. And that was another thing along with Rogel Dorn's idealism. And like you were saying, like they're the perfect soldiers, like you said, Hal. They're here now to do what the Emperor needs them to do. They know that in the future, if things worked out well for the Great Crusade, in the future there would eventually be no more wars and whatnot. But as far as they were concerned, that's putting the cart before the horse. For now, don't look to the Imperial Fist to be nice and kind in everyone. They were the Emperor's Crusaders and his militant arm to spread across the galaxy. Maybe the Ultramarines and, the White Scars, they can do things like, practice bureaucracy and, calligraphy and all that noble stuff. That's not what the Fists are here for. Right now, the Emperor needs soldiers, and that's what the Fists are. Nothing more, nothing less. Which, again, I think very cool and something the Fists don't get credit for too often, because people think boring fortify guys, and that's the end of it. And of note, the Emperor clearly agrees with me in some regard, because they were the Legion chosen to fight alongside the Emperor more than any other, and he bestowed more honors upon them than any other himself. So the Imperial Fist did not get the most compliances in the galaxy, military or diplomatic. That was Horus and Gilliman with the most military and diplomatic conquests respectively. But the Imperial Fists got more direct honors from the Emperor than any other, and they were in many ways his legion, ignoring, of course, the Custodians. And as the Great Crusade was nearing its end, not an end foreseen by anyone except maybe the Emperor, granted, but nearing its end nonetheless, the Emperor returned home to Terra to work on a project known only to a select few. And, of course, none of his children, because that would be too much. The Webway Project, which I'm just going to say right now, feel free to yell at me, Andy, a completely futile endeavor to get into the Eldar Webway and claim it for humanity. I don't think that would have ever worked out in the best case scenario, but
isn't the logic that Chaos can't? They have to win / get all of humanity under the Emperor's banner, because if they bring humanity into the Webway, the Chaos gods can't use humanity to corrupt the universe.
That was the logic. I think the Emperor was perhaps discounting the horrible Gribblies that live in the Webway.
Gribblies, that's a good word.
No, that's the Dark Eldar or Gribblies.
Oh, it is utter I think every character who knows that, like the full final plan, just says it's utter hubris, but he just says, I know, but like there's just the other option is basically death. Like every other
yeah. Okay,
every other
what's your plan?
every other timeline.
The other option would have been teaching people about the dangers of chaos and warning them not to listen to the voices in the dark.
Yeah, and
but that would require the Emperor to explain himself. Yeah, why would I do that? Let's just dig a hole into the eldritch tunnel of horrible beings in its side of it. This can't fail.
I don't know. Something as simple, even in our modern day, you tell people like don't lick, icy like poles outside so your tongue doesn't stick to it. And you know what? People still do it because you can't.
Yeah,
you can't.
but
they'll just go, I'll do it, and just to spite you.
Goofy because it's funny. I think there's a difference between licking a frozen pole in winter and damning yourself for all eternity.
I don't know. It was good enough for Erebus. He was like, right, why not? I'm gonna be silly. I'm gonna do the chaos thing. Sounds fun.
I'm just saying. Half of the Empire of Man never turned on Sigmar. Worked a lot better for him.
Nice. That's
The
right.
shiny gold
Still
hammer.
lost.
He did have a shiny gold. Maybe that was the issue.
Warhammer.
The Emperor didn't have a Warhammer 40,000.
Cringe.
But moving on, the Fists, alongside their Primarch, would, along with the Emperor, return to Terra, as they were his legion, and they would become its Praetorians of Terra, the home of humanity. And not only would this exist throughout the rest of the Great Crusade, the Horus Heresy, but well into the 41st millennia, even after the legions were broken up, 10,000 years passed, the Fists have ever stalwartly remained on Terra from the end of the Great Crusade to the modern timeline. And the last major thing of note they did before everything goes horribly wrong was they would begin fortifying Terra, as of course its Praetorians, and Rogodorn being the siege expert, or the fortification expert he is. They would create it into not only mankind's capital world, but the ultimate fortress in the galaxy, and one of the most well-defended places in all of the 41st, or 30th at this time, 30th to the 41st, 42nd millennium. Invading Terra is basically a protracted form of suicide for anyone who might try it. And that was the Imperial Fists throughout the Great Crusade. Any questions? Anything to add, anyone?
I just enjoy the fact that Sigismund is still the best by far. All the Space Marines, and he's just completely ordinary.
Although I do like his appearance in the Rogodorn Primarch book, where he's like a kind of budding Templar, and he's not the first, and he's like still learning the ropes. And there's a duel between a Dark Angel champion and the Templar in charge, and the Templar loses, and he's like, "Oh, you could have done this with this," and it's just like the younger Sigismund, and even his own book, where it's like he's being attacked by gangs on Terra, I think it is, and it's got like this. I don't know if it's like the like bar of like metallic whatever it is he has is then forged into the black sword, or if it's just a parallel, but like he has this like chunk of something, he just like hits them with it, and they're like, is that part of it? I don't know. He's a cool character anyway.
I think the Imperial Fists lost a lot of coolness after the Horus Heresy, which is probably why everyone thinks they're boring, because all their personality went into the successor chapters.
That's when all the Like the crusading elements got put into the Black Templars and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
Pain.
I mean, Courland was pretty cool during the War of the Beast, and then it was like, oh, the chapter's extinct, and then all the successors have to be like, all right, put some in,
Maybe
contribute some of your members to rebuild the chapter. Go on.
maybe that's what ultimately turned them into fortification experts, and that was it when 999 out of 1,000 of them died.
Yeah.
Huge shout out to the beast, truly morbidly a beast.
With
Okay.
that amazing closing statement, though, that was the 5th, 6th, and 7th Legion. The next time we do a timeline episode, we'll obviously be doing the 8th, 9th, and 10th. I think that's Night Lord, Blood Angels, and Iron Hands, which will be a good episode.
Nice varied one.
Nice little bit of culture / Legion love there. But that's not the next episode of the Beginning to Expert. Next time we will be doing, I think it is Necrons, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah.
Hosted by Eli. Eli gets to talk about Necrons for hours, and you guys have
5
to sit
hours
there.
straight.
Losers of the War in Heaven.
Hey,
Well,
what is it? What is it?
Losers of the War in Heaven.
We won that war. What are you talking about?
What happened for the who ruled the galaxy for 65 million years?
And then didn't.
Who rules it now?
The Imperium.
The Imperium.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
The big question is, who's going to die out first?
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
it.
The Necrons already died out. They're soulless robots, so easy clap.
Hey, we won the war in heaven.
That which is dead may
Cool.
never die.
Yeah, people who say the Necrons won the war in heaven are the same as the people who say, yeah, America won Vietnam.
I don't know.
Hey, we won the war. We didn't win afterwards. What happened? We won the actual war in heaven.
I-
Those ones
Doesn't
are all
matter.
Guys,
They deserved
what-
it.
the 41st millennium is a post-heaven society. We need to just put all our faith in the Imperium and the Omnissiah because we're in a post-heaven
Put
Put
society.
your faith in Iliad
Oh.
and the Dark Muses.
With that being said, though, we hope you all enjoyed this. As you can see, the argument's already starting for the next episode. Hope you enjoyed this one. Some of the legions here are pretty. There's a bit more depth to them than you would ever realize. So we hope you enjoyed those little extra bits of lore that you may not have already known. And if you were new, hopefully you got a good sort of flavor / an example and understanding of these legions. Maybe those 3 aren't your favorite, but you can still find something good within all of them. With that being said, though, thank you so much for watching, for listening. If you can, like and subscribe. That really helps us and make more content, and obviously supports all of us talking and making trash Warhammer memes and jokes. So with that being said, though, again, thank you so much for listening, and we'll catch you on the next one. Peace.
Take care, everyone.
Oh, I love you. Glory
Alright.
to the dynasties. Even if you're a fleshling, I still love you.